when you look at the landscape of a professional services organization in terms of the challenges that a professional services organization faces and their key challenges, clearly there are, in our mind, 6 major pressure points that pretty well are universally components of that industry vertical, because it's predicated on talent sourcing, attracting, retaining, development of that talent is always top of mind. Also, being able to predict demand with scarce talent or scarce resources and making sure you're maximizing that talent and increasing your margins is always a demand question. Increasingly, as professional services organizations have become far more sophisticated, the understanding of the patterns that are within their business so that they can have increased visibility into any data that they might have, resource utilization, optimization. Pricing is an ongoing challenge to ensure that you're pricing the opportunities effectively and also ensuring that you can learn from your prior pricing submissions whether or not you had that elasticity or market demand, relevance, etc., as well as focusing on the best deals to win more. So those are some of the key challenges that are top of mind when you look at a professional services organization. So, ladies and gentlemen, I really wanted to give you a bit of sense of what was happening or what we think is happening in the professional services arena. I'd like to now start to get underway to interview Dinesh, and we've organized some key questions. I've got about 7 here prepared. We'll open it up to the audience here for you to ask us any questions. We'll be delighted to try and answer them. So, Dinesh, great to have you on the line. Wish I was sitting with you in person. Would like to understand in terms of, as you look back a year and a bit ago before we started with our program together, what was the problem or challenge that you were trying to resolve and to focus on? If you could maybe give us some insight there. Thanks, Dinesh.
Sure. So we had a fundamental issue in our business, which was we have very limited sales resource and a large number of opportunities that we have to filter and focus on. Really, that issue on your slide earlier, focus on the ones that we have the highest probability of closing. Unfortunately, there's a large amount of cost required in qualifying those opportunities, and we were looking for a way of identifying those vital few where we had the highest % chance of closing, and then use objective data points in addition to the subjective ones from our salespeople and our solutions people. So that's kind of what brought us to your firm.
Thanks, Dinesh. So I think one of the things that I know will help everybody is to understand what is your, whatever you can comfortable in sharing, what is your current sales operating process, and where do we fit into your whole solution set, because clearly we're one capability area, and also how much data did you need for us to be able to apply the predictive analytics?
Sure. So you guys are an integral part of our process. We use your tool set in addition to our sales pipeline reviews and also technical reviews, as we want to try to triangulate multiple sources of data in order to try to get an accurate picture of what the customer potential is. And so we have a very structured sales process with different percentages at different levels. We collect a lot of information, and Saleschoice goes through all of the different pieces of information that we collect, both account and opportunity data pieces that we collect, and then gives us a Saleschoice score. And then we use that score in addition to what our salespeople and our solutions people are figuring out on calls to try to make an assessment whether this is a high probability opportunity or a lower probability opportunity.
And I'm not sure if you recall, Dinesh, about how many won or lost opportunities as initial base set that we needed, but I think in your case you had 7 years of historical data, which certainly made it much easier. As a minimum for those here listening, we typically need at least 1,500 won or lost opportunities. Next question. Obviously, it's been a year and a bit, but as you look back in time, and there may be still some new challenges, but what are the challenges and lessons that you've learned in applying predictive analytics into your sales process? What kinds of things can you share with the folks that we have on the line in terms of lessons learned, things that might pop up in their considerations?
So, predictive analytics, it presents a huge opportunity. It needs to be part of a integrated attack, which means that you have to, educate your people on it. You need to build it into your pipeline management process, plus also sales process. and treat it as it needs to be, which is a tool, a management tool, both self-management tool from the perspective of the salesperson evaluating and deciding where to spend their time and resources, but also executive or business management tool to help you identify not only which opportunities you're going to have the best chance to, where you can double down and triple down on opportunities where there's a very, very high potential. So that's how we used it. That's fundamentally the leverage we got, was the fact that we could not only not necessarily put as much effort or try to dequalify out very quickly lower probability opportunities, it let us find those diamonds where we could overinvest, over-allocate resource with the hope that we could maybe expand the opportunity beyond the initial scope as defined by the client.
So Dinesh, one question that we often get asked is why not use Salesforce pivot tables to solve your needs, or doesn't Salesforce have this type of functionality? And what would you say to people with those kinds of reservations?
So we're a fairly small firm. We're all kind of working our butts off doing 2 or 3 different jobs. So if I had the dedicated resource and, more importantly, the expertise to be able to look at data in a way that's statistically significant, build data sets, and then have the Excel wizardry to generate pivot tables that would allow me to ask those questions, awesome. Great, but the cost of all of those people and all of those capabilities relative to purchasing a packaged tool made it a no-brainer. I mean, the thing is I don't have to know how to do any of those things. I just need to rely on Saleschoice doing it for me. And so from my perspective, given the size of our firm, in the absence of having a dedicated data science team and a dedicated financial analysis team, Saleschoice very easily filled that gap and allowed me to get that capability without all the cost.
So obviously the big question always is, now that you've made the investment, what have been the benefits that you've realized in terms of Saleschoice, and also what's happening in your business over the last 18 months with having that incremental insight and also streamlining your sales process? And has there been any upside?
Well, I'm talking to you, so I guess the simple answer is yes. We've been able to deliver more sales production with less salespeople. And in the services business, sales is very, very expensive because we have, in general, most services businesses are 20% at the bottom line. And so the result is that you really have to generate $5 in revenue for every dollar that you're spending in sales, which is a very, very high percentage, a percentage that, is much lower in products companies. So, for us, we've been able to deliver both our core business and grow our business without adding salespeople or adding additional sales resource, which means that we are able to grow our operating profits, which makes everybody very, very happy. As we scale up, we are now very careful about adding people. Usually your revenue numbers grow, you just say, well, I'm going to add this many people. What Saleschoice has allowed us to do is actually start looking at accounts and look at scaling our business on an account potential basis, as opposed to having to follow the formula, salesperson equals X revenue. We can actually drive more and more sales revenue out of existing salespeople, which is a great way to drive profitability. And so far, we haven't seen the top of that curve yet, though I expect we will see it shortly. But right now, we continue to grow our numbers without adding people, so I'll keep you posted how far it goes.
That's great to hear, Dinesh. Thank you. So for those sales leaders or other interested parties we have on the line, what recommendations do you have for them in terms of considering to use predictive analytics based on your experience? And is this something that small businesses, medium, large, should already have a strategy on? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, your audience understands their business far better than I do. So what I would say is that recognize that data is the currency of the new economy, and so you need to figure out how you can leverage data in a way that will drive business results. So in our business, how we leverage data is we use subjective and objective data points. So subjective data points are those very expensive, highly qualified people that are interacting with your clients and your prospects. So you need to absolutely capture that data. And then you need to capture the objective data of what your historical trends are telling you about your business. And then triangulate, because neither one tells the whole story in and of itself. To me, if you're looking to build and grow a business in in the future, over the course of the next 5 or 6 years, if you haven't incorporated some sort of analytics, predictive, or even historical into your sales management methodology, you will probably face intense competition, and you may see business impacts because of that dimension is lacking.
The last question is, in terms of the overall market, you kind of touched on the fact that data is the new currency, and I think that's a very relevant term. There's obviously a lot of messaging around the significance of big data, pattern recognition, but there's many sales executives that are resisting some of these approaches. And what do you think the implications of doing nothing? Do you think businesses obviously will lose share? To your earlier point, do you think they can go extinct? They will become increasingly extinct. But obviously, change brings certain types of Luddite behaviors. So I'd just love to hear any thoughts and further implications.
So I've been through a few of these cycles, and one of the things I've recognized through these types of business cycles, the first big cycle that I went through was in the mid-90s, when the internet showed up and everybody said, that's a fad, that's not going to turn into anything. And well, companies that didn't take it into consideration, their shareholders and their employees ultimately bore the consequences of that. Then mobile, in 2008, our business was talking to software vendors and large Fortune 500 companies, and many of them, senior people in those companies, said, mobile is interesting, but it's not relevant to us. We're in the aircraft business, or we're in the water or chemical business or manufacturing business. Why would we need mobile? And I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a business leader today that hasn't integrated some dimension of mobile into their business strategy. I think the same thing is true for data. Data has always been part of business decision making. What's changing, I think, is the volume of data that we now have access to as business leaders. So failure to leverage those resources will result in slower decision making, and ultimately that's what separates folks that win from those that will lose eventually, is the speed of which they are able to make decisions and the quality of those decisions they make. And I think you don't have to jump in and go, I'm going to build out a data science team. You just need to get started. You can choose where you start. For us, we started where we had the most data and the most potential upside, which was in sales. So that's where we started. I presume the leaders on the call will be able to identify where they need to start that's going to create the maximum leverage for their businesses.
And that's a great segue, Dinesh. It's hard not to, because your earlier point is data's been around for a long time, right? And, many companies have built out their reporting processes and practices, and kind of goes back to that earlier framing around the types of analysis. A lot of it's been looking in the rear view mirror, saying, well, this happened, now what do we need to do in order to improve or optimize? So the foresight piece is what's really quite revolutionary, and in order to do that, you need, to your point, analyze large data sets, but getting more into the science, doing some of that statistical pattern recognition that, quite frankly, humans just aren't, I would call it, the amount of resourcing that's required and the computational power. And now, we're starting to move these kinds of capabilities right into sales processes. So it's an exciting time to be a sales professional. It's also a bit of a scary time. Many salespeople don't have all the training in data science and analytics, and not that they need to understand all of the nuances, but they certainly have to have a hunger and appreciation for foresight, and technologies can play out